Remember those simple techniques for making asphalt? Well, today we're going to use those techniques to make a much larger diorama to fit a Detolf. And it'll have slight differences in elevation, so those figures can really stand out when you place them all together on your shelf. Let's make this together on this episode of Crafted by Metamorphic Customs. Alright everyone, we're going to start off with some XPS foam as we usually do. I've got a base piece of XPS foam, and that's about 14 inches wide by about 11 inches deep, or the size of a typical Detolf shelf. And I've stacked on some pieces at the top, which I've cut out in random shapes. This can be any shape you want, but as you can see, the bottom one is about an inch thick, and the top ones are the one on the right is about an inch thick as well, but the one on the left I've cut in half. It's about half an inch, just to give different elevations. And I've cut out these jagged edges in any pattern you want. This can be any shape. The one on the right is going to be one elevation. The one towards the back on the left, another elevation. It could be any shape you want. Now, I've marked out a black square here on the left. That's because the area beyond it that I'm pointing out now will be indented, and it will be like a shallow area. And this piece will actually be the pavement or the asphalt that I'm going to add on at a later time. But for now, let's get the two chunks of XPS foam that we cut out that will represent your different elevations, and I'm going to go ahead and carve the edges a little bit more. The only reason I'm doing this is just to get a shape that I like. You don't have to do this, or you could do it to your own content. There's no pattern here, as I always say. It's just making shapes that you think look realistic. And once you're done, go ahead and glue those different elevations down. From there, I'm going to do the same thing to the edges of the overall base. Now, you can keep a perfectly square edge if you'd like on the outside. That's fine. The only thing I'll say is you'll definitely want to cut the edges on the inside of those different elevations that point inside to the base to make it look more realistic. But the outside could be straight if you want. It's up to you. I like to have at least the front edge carved out as you see here. Which leads me to the next step. I'm going to use an old soldering iron to melt the PVA foam and give more texture. This is an old worn out soldering iron, and it's great for this application. And when you're burning PVA or melting it, make sure you wear a mask or do this outside. Preferably do it outside, but definitely wear a mask for ventilation. The fumes are not good for you. I repeat, wear some kind of mask and make sure you're in a well ventilated area. And I'm going to use a soldering iron to essentially melt away these pieces of XPS foam, creating like a little canyon, divots. It really helps to give it not only that shape, but that texture. This could also be achieved with a butane torch, which is another great tool. To do this, again, if you're going to use a butane torch, wear some kind of mask, some kind of ventilation, protect yourself, or do it outside, right? So, very important. Can't say that enough. So I'm using this, I'm creating this little canyon, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the outer edges. I'm just going to pass it over here, and it'll create a nice burnt texture. And it just gives it a really nice effect. And now watch as I do this also here to the outside edge, which is just flat. It was flat. And I'm just running the edge of the soldering iron along it, and it's creating this rock texture. It's pretty simple. Took a couple of seconds here. This is sped up, but it wasn't much longer. It was like about 30 seconds per side or less. And instant texture. Instant rock formation texture as I run that soldering iron. Remember to use if you're going to use a soldering iron, use one that you're not going to use for electronics or for actual soldering later, because it'll ruin it. And I'm just going back here and just basically melting some more pieces of this XPS foam away. You just need to do this till you're content with your final product. And next up, we're going to work on the asphalt or pavement layer on the top. Cut out these thin pieces of XPS foam, slightly thicker than 1/4 of an inch, but just under a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to cut out the edges, again, irregular cuts, as if the pavement has broken because there's been an earthquake or some kind of impact, right? and just cover the flat textures, the top textures. So basically you're covering the upper surfaces that you haven't burned in with the soldering iron or butane torch. I'm also going to add smaller chunks of pavement that's cracked and fallen into the holes or the crevices that you've created with the soldering iron. And then I'm slowly going to add smaller and smaller pieces. I'm also going to add this chunk to the upper left or the rear left area. I think there's something missing here, and this gives it a good visual. I'm going to make sure, since it's going to be standing up kind of vertical, I'm going to support that with 2 metal rods. I'm just pushing it down into the existing XPS foam. And I made a hole when I was inserting the rod, so I'll fill that in with hot glue. Next, I'm going to use PVA glue, Elmer's Glue All, diluted with water 1:1. And I'm going to use that to apply this smaller rock debris, which are just small little chunks of XPS foam that are, spare chunks that are, as I was carving the original pieces, you get these little pieces that are just spare. I'm going to use that as rubble. You can always use kitty litter as well. Kitty litter makes great small rubble for this scale. But since I already had these small little chunks, I'll use that. And again, that was adhered with PVA glue. Not Mod Podge, because this is what I'm using now. My typical Mod Podge and tile grout mixture, which is 1:1. And then I add some brown acrylic paint and mix that all together. And this will be the ground texture that's under the asphalt, under the pavement surface. So all the areas that you melted with the torch, that's what you're gonna hit here with this brown color. Now, this could be black dirt. Heck, in some cases it might be more realistic if it was black dirt, but because the pavement's gonna be, or the asphalt's gonna be black, I wanted to do this brown. Now, I'm using some FW Inks Black just to add some shading to this brown. We don't want the brown to be too reddish. We wanted to give it some good shading just so that it stands out from the asphalt. I'm also using the FW Inks to get in between the small areas of the little rock debris, the small rock debris or kitty litter that you've placed down. And that helps to just get in those small areas so that when you're applying the asphalt texture and you miss anything, it's still black in there. So it makes it a lot easier. Now, if you've got some of that texture paint, the brown texture paint left over, which I did, great. What I'm going to use now is, this already has tile grout in it, but now I'm going to add sand, which is a coarser grain. Plus, I'm going to add these little rock chips and mix that all together to give 3 different textures or 3 different sizes of essentially coarse grain here, and then add in black. We're attempting to make the asphalt color here. So the 3 different textures, the tile grout, sand, and then the small rock chips will really help to get across that asphalt texture, which we kind of saw in that video I put out a couple of weeks ago. And once you've got that, now you're going to hit all the surfaces here, everything that would be asphalt, that is not the ground texture under the asphalt. And it's just a paste. You just apply it on and wait till it's dry. Have fun with this. And remember that old cereal box I cut up to create this street lane marking? Well, we're going to use that again. The lanes are about 1 inch wide, and they're about 3/4 of an inch apart in the middle, so there's 3/4 of an inch gap in between both of them. I'm applying white first with an airbrush. Any white color will do. I'm using pure white by Vallejo, but the white is good as a primer. For this yellow, and I'm using a bright yellow, I think this is moon yellow if I'm not mistaken, again from Vallejo, but any bright yellow or pure white will do. And once those are on, I'm going to go in with the black texture paint and just color in the rocks that would have been over the painted area, like the little pieces of rubble or just the spots that may have chipped off. We want to make this look old and worn and like it wasn't just painted on, because it was just painted on. But that's why we're going in and coloring that black. And next we'll go to dry brushing. We're using a raw sienna color, but it's just a mid-brown color. And I'm hitting all basically of the ground texture. And I'm also lightly applying it on the pavement to make it appear as, it's dirty, the ground, dirt has now moved on to the asphalt. Then I'm going to take my seafoam sponge, but any sponge with any regular surface will do. You can use a sponge you have in your kitchen that you might not want to use anymore, pick at it a little bit so it has an irregular edge, and then use it with different paints. I'm using different shades of light gray with the foam and applying that to the asphalt texture all over, even over the yellow lanes I've painted before. And this is what really brings out that asphalt texture and creates depth and makes it look like old worn asphalt. You don't want to have it be just black unless it was literally just paved. That's not what we were going for here. So that's why we're applying these different shades of gray. Medium gray, light gray, any kind of grays will do. And then we're going to put some finishing touches here. We're going to use FW inks, about 3 to 4 drops of black mixed with water, about 10 to 15 drops of water. And I'm just going to apply this really watered down ink over certain areas, wherever you'd like, especially where the stripes are, just to give that appearance of old worn asphalt. And here it is. Here's some close-up pictures of that texture. Not bad, not bad. I think this turned out pretty well. Good textures all around, and you can see the ground texture there. And the slightly different elevations lets you put different characters at different levels. It's still not that tall because we want it to fit inside a Detolf. That was my goal, without modifying the Detolf. And of course, you can always use it across different franchises, different brands. Heck, even put John Wick on there. Anything will really work. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to please like and subscribe, and remember to stay crafted.